Boom! The gas explosion rocked Fort Bragg's kitchen at exactly 5:30 p.m. during dinner rush, sending metal debris flying through thick black smoke that choked the air. 6 young recruits were trapped inside the burning wreckage, their desperate cries for help echoing from within the inferno that had once been the mess hall's heart. "Someone call 911!" Blake Harrison shouted, his bald head gleaming with sweat as he stepped back from the heat blast. The massive man in his army blue t-shirt crossed his thick arms and shook his head. "Where's the kitchen staff when you actually need them?" Emma Mitchell stood frozen before the chaos, her 32-year-old frame seeming impossibly small against the towering flames. Her light brown hair, usually tied in a neat high bun with a few loose curls framing her face, had come partially undone from the explosion's force. Those captivating green eyes, set in a face marked by natural freckles across her cheeks and nose, reflected the orange glow of the fire. Her fitted light gray t-shirt and dark military pants were already dusted with debris, but her brown combat boots remained planted firmly on the ground. All day long, she had endured the mockery from Special Forces candidates about her long sleeves, about being just kitchen staff, about hiding whatever made her too weak for real service. Her fair porcelain skin had flushed countless times under their ridicule, but she had said nothing, done nothing to defend herself. Now, 6 lives hung in the balance, and emergency responders were still 8 minutes away. Blake smirked through the smoke, his massive frame blocking others from moving forward. "Told you kitchen people can't handle real pressure? Someone with actual training needs to take charge here." But Emma had already moved. No words, no hesitation. She disappeared into the flames like a ghost entering hell itself. In exactly 18 minutes, everyone at Fort Bragg would understand they had judged completely wrong about this small woman with the gentle green eyes. They would discover the secret she had hidden beneath those long sleeves, a truth that would change everything they thought they knew about courage, sacrifice, and the real meaning of service. If watching someone get dismissed for their appearance while lives hang in the balance makes your blood boil, then you're exactly where you need to be. Smash that like button right now, hit subscribe, and if you believe in standing up for those who serve in silence, the thanks button below helps me bring you more stories of hidden heroes who prove that real strength doesn't announce itself. But let's go back to where this day really began. 6 hours earlier in that same mess hall, when the morning sun was just beginning to filter through the windows and Emma Mitchell was setting up for what she thought would be another quiet day of service. The Fort Bragg mess hall at 11:30 a.m. buzzed with the controlled energy of 200-plus military personnel rotating through lunch. Fluorescent lights reflected off polished surfaces, while the steady rhythm of boots on concrete created a percussion that Emma had grown to find comforting over the past 18 months. She moved between the serving stations with practiced efficiency, her green eyes automatically cataloging every detail of the room's layout. Exits, blind spots, potential choke points, defensive positions. Most people saw a kitchen worker refilling steam trays. Emma saw a tactical environment with multiple variables requiring constant assessment. "Mitchell," Sergeant Miller's voice carried across the kitchen area. The graying kitchen supervisor approached with his usual morning checklist, but today his weathered face carried something else: concern. "Got a heads up from the CO's office. We're hosting some Special Forces selection candidates today. They'll be evaluating our operation as part of their leadership assessment." Emma nodded, adjusting a loose curl that had escaped her bun. "How many, Sergeant?" 4 primary candidates, plus their evaluation team. Word is one of them is General Harrison's son. Miller lowered his voice. "Politics aside, these boys have been known to be demanding. Just keep your head down and do your job." "Always do, Sergeant." Miller studied her for a moment, the way he often did when he sensed there was more beneath Emma's quiet surface than she let on. In 18 months, he had never seen her flustered, never seen her make a mistake under pressure, never seen her react to the occasional harassment that came with being one of the few women in the kitchen staff. There was something about her calm that spoke of experience far beyond food service. "Mitchell, can I ask you something?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Those long sleeves you always wear, even in this heat. You don't have to tell me anything, but if you ever need to talk to someone about whatever brought you here, my door's always open." Emma's fingers unconsciously smoothed the gray fabric covering her arms. "I appreciate that, Sergeant. Really." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of heavy boots and loud voices approaching the mess hall entrance. Through the serving window, Emma could see 4 men in pristine uniforms, making their entrance with the kind of swagger that announced their presence to everyone within 50 feet. The leader was impossible to miss. 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and attitude, his bald head catching the overhead lights as he surveyed the room like he owned it. Blake Harrison wore his army blue t-shirt like armor, the fabric stretched tight across his massive chest and shoulders. Behind him followed 3 others: Derek Walsh, a wiry man with nervous energy and calculating eyes; Ashley Rodriguez, a woman whose medical corps insignia didn't soften the dismissive way she looked at everything around her; and Tyler Brooks, whose equipment specialist badges were polished to perfection. "This is it?" Blake's voice carried easily across the mess hall as he gestured at the serving area. "This is supposed to represent military dining excellence?" "The standards have clearly slipped," Ashley added, her tone suggesting she'd found the entire facility wanting before even tasting the food. "I can't imagine what kind of people they're hiring for food service these days." Emma continued her work, methodically checking temperatures and ensuring proper food rotation, but her peripheral vision tracked every movement of the group. Something about Blake's posture, the way he held his shoulders, the rhythm of his speech, it felt rehearsed, performed. She had spent enough time around genuine military personnel to recognize authenticity, and something about Blake Harrison felt like an actor playing a role. "Excuse me," Derek Walsh called out, approaching the serving line where Emma was adjusting a steam tray. "You there, kitchen worker?" Emma looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. "How can I help you?" "We need someone to explain your food safety protocols. Are you qualified to discuss operational procedures, or should we ask for someone with actual authority?" The question was designed to diminish, to establish hierarchy, to put her in her place. Emma had heard variations of it countless times, in various contexts throughout her life. She set down her serving spoon and faced him fully. "I can help with any questions about our food safety procedures. We follow all Department of Defense guidelines for military dining facilities, including temperature monitoring every 30 minutes, proper storage rotation using the FIFO method, and contamination prevention protocols that exceed civilian restaurant standards." Derek blinked, clearly not expecting such a comprehensive response. "And you know all this because it's my job to know it." Blake had been listening from across the room, and now he approached with the predatory smile of someone who had found a new target for entertainment. Well, the kitchen help thinks she's an expert on military standards." Emma returned to her work, but Blake wasn't finished. He leaned against the serving counter, his massive frame looming over her much smaller one. "Tell me something, kitchen worker. What's with the long sleeves? It's got to be 85 degrees in here. Personal preference." "Personal preference?" Blake laughed, a sound designed to draw attention and invite others to join in the mockery. "Come on, we're all military here. What are you hiding under there? Bad tattoos? Scars from some kind of accident?" Ashley Rodriguez had moved closer, drawn by the prospect of entertainment. Maybe she's embarrassed about something. Self-harm scars, perhaps? Or track marks? "That's enough." Emma's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made several nearby personnel look up from their meals. "Oh, she's got some fight in her after all," Tyler Brooks chimed in, joining the circle that was forming around Emma. "But seriously, the long sleeves in this heat? It's either scars you're ashamed of, or you're hiding something that disqualifies you from food service." Blake reached across the serving counter, as if to touch Emma's sleeve. "Why don't we just—" Emma's hand moved with lightning precision, intercepting Blake's wrist and applying just enough pressure to stop his motion without causing pain. The movement was so fluid, so controlled, that most observers didn't even notice it had happened, but Blake felt it. The exact placement of her grip, the knowledge of pressure points, the unmistakable competence of someone who understood human anatomy and leverage. "Please don't touch me," Emma said calmly, releasing his wrist and returning to her work as if nothing had happened. Blake stared at his wrist, flexing his fingers. For just a moment, his cocky expression flickered into something else. Confusion, maybe even a hint of wariness. But the moment passed, and his swagger returned. "Defensive too. Kitchen worker with anger management issues. That's exactly what we need handling our food." The confrontation was drawing attention from other personnel in the mess hall. A few junior enlisted soldiers had stopped eating to watch the exchange, while several NCOs at nearby tables were beginning to frown at the obvious harassment taking place. Sergeant Miller emerged from the kitchen proper, his face dark with disapproval. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Blake replied smoothly. "Just getting acquainted with your staff. making sure we understand the quality of personnel responsible for our nutrition. Miller's eyes flicked to Emma, who gave him the slightest shake of her head. Don't escalate this, her expression said. I can handle it. Mitchell is one of our most reliable staff members, Miller said carefully. If you have specific concerns about food service, I'm happy to address them through proper channels. Oh, I'm sure she's very reliable, Ashley said with a smirk. Reliable enough to hide whatever she's so ashamed of under those sleeves. Emma's hands stilled for just a moment as she arranged garnishes on a serving tray. The comment had hit something deeper than the others, touched on something that went beyond mere workplace harassment. When she looked up, her green eyes held a weight that hadn't been there before. I wear long sleeves because I choose to wear long sleeves. My reasons are my own, and they don't affect my ability to do my job. Everything affects your ability to do your job, Derek interjected. If you're hiding medical conditions, psychiatric issues, substance abuse problems, I'm not hiding anything that concerns you or affects food safety. Prove it, Blake said suddenly. Roll up your sleeves. Show us there's nothing to worry about. The mess hall had grown quieter now, with more people tuning into the confrontation. Emma could feel dozens of eyes on her, could sense the ugly entertainment that public humiliation provided for some people. She had been in situations like this before, in different contexts, where revealing the truth would end the harassment but create entirely new problems. I don't need to prove anything to you. Yes, you do, Blake pressed, his voice carrying the authority he was used to wielding. We're evaluating this facility's operations, and that includes personnel. If you're hiding something that could compromise food safety or operational security, we need to know about it. It was a clever manipulation, wrapping personal curiosity and cruelty in the language of legitimate concern. Emma recognized the tactic because she had seen it used by interrogators who wrapped torture in the language of national security. My medical information is protected by privacy laws, and my personal appearance is not subject to your approval. Look at her getting all legal on us, Tyler laughed. Kitchen worker quoting privacy laws? What's next? Constitutional rights? Emma's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. These people had no idea how much she actually knew about constitutional rights, about the laws they were so casually mocking, about the real meaning of service and sacrifice. They saw a woman in kitchen whites and assumed ignorance, weakness, irrelevance. They had no idea that under those long sleeves lay the evidence of 847 explosive devices successfully disarmed. They couldn't see the scars from shrapnel that had torn through her flesh while she shielded 3 wounded soldiers from an IED blast in Kandahar province. They didn't know about the precision burns from defusing chemical weapons in underground bunkers, or the surgical scars from operations to repair nerve damage sustained during 18 months of captivity and torture. They saw long sleeves and assumed shame. Emma wore them to hide a legacy of heroism that would make their pretend military achievements look like playground games. But she said none of this. Instead, she continued her work with the same quiet competence she had shown every day for 18 months. Because the mission, even this simple mission of serving food to hungry soldiers, required completion regardless of personal discomfort. I think we've established what we need to know, Blake announced to his group. Kitchen worker with attitude problems and something to hide. Probably not the kind of person who should be handling food for real soldiers. As the group moved away from the serving line, apparently satisfied with their morning's entertainment, Emma felt a presence beside her. She looked up to see David Kim, a young specialist who had been watching the entire confrontation from a nearby table. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "that was some handling of pressure points you showed back there. My dad taught me a little about that stuff when he came back from overseas." Emma studied the young soldier's face. There was genuine respect there, curiosity without malice, and something else, recognition that she was more than she appeared to be. "Your father served?" "Yes, ma'am. Marines. 2 tours in Afghanistan before he—" David's voice trailed off, but Emma understood. Too many stories ended that way. "He taught you well, smart man, teaching his son to recognize real training when he sees it." David's eyes widened slightly at the implication in her words, but before he could respond, Ashley Rodriguez's voice cut across the mess hall. "I'm sorry, but did I just hear kitchen staff giving military advice to enlisted personnel? That seems highly inappropriate." Emma and David both turned to see Ashley approaching with Derek close behind. Blake had moved to intercept other diners, apparently continuing his evaluation tour, but these two seemed fixated on finding more opportunities to assert their authority over the kitchen staff. Just conversation, ma'am, David replied carefully. Conversation about military tactics? From someone whose only qualification is food service? Ashley's medical insignia caught the light as she moved closer. I think there might be some boundary issues here that need addressing. Derek nodded sagely. Civilian contractors thinking they understand military operations. It's a common problem in support roles. Emma's hands continued their steady work, but something had shifted in her posture. The casual dismissal of her service, the assumption that she was a civilian contractor with delusions of military knowledge, had touched a nerve that went beyond personal pride. I didn't give military advice, she said evenly. I simply acknowledged that Specialist Kim's father had taught him well. About pressure points and combat techniques, Ashley pressed. Where exactly would a kitchen worker learn to recognize such things? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma could feel the weight of multiple conversations that had stopped around them, could sense the growing audience for this confrontation. She had choices to make now: continue to deflect and endure, escalate the situation by revealing more than she wanted to, or find a middle path that might satisfy their curiosity without exposing everything. I've had some basic self-defense training. Most women in military environments do. Basic self-defense training? Derek repeated skeptically. That's what you call that wrist control technique, because I've seen basic self-defense training, and that wasn't it. Tyler Brooks had returned from his circuit of the mess hall and was now listening with renewed interest. Wait, what technique? What did I miss? Kitchen worker here apparently has some martial arts background. She's been hiding along with whatever's under those sleeves, Ashley explained with obvious relish. Emma's hands stilled on the serving spoon she was holding. The conversation was spiraling into territory she had hoped to avoid, drawing exactly the kind of attention she had spent 18 months trying to deflect. She could feel the familiar weight of decision, the same feeling she had experienced in dozens of life-or-death situations where choosing the wrong path meant mission failure or casualties. But this wasn't a combat zone. This was a mess hall full of soldiers who deserved to eat their lunch in peace, without becoming unwilling audiences to someone else's power games. She could endure whatever these people wanted to dish out, if it meant maintaining the calm environment that let tired soldiers relax for 30 minutes during their day. I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be, she said finally. I'm just here to do my job. And we're here to evaluate whether people are qualified for their jobs, Blake Harrison's voice boomed as he rejoined the group. So far, we've got a kitchen worker who won't show her arms, claims military knowledge she shouldn't have, and demonstrates combat techniques during food service. That's quite a collection of red flags. Emma looked up at Blake's massive frame, noting again the subtle wrongness in his bearing, the way his military bearing felt like a costume rather than second nature. Something about this entire situation felt orchestrated, like a test with parameters she didn't fully understand. What exactly do you want from me? Blake's smile was predatory. Simple. Roll up your sleeves, explain your background, and stop pretending to be something you're not. If you're just kitchen staff, prove it. If you're something else, stop lying about it. The demand was wrapped in logic, presented as reasonable, but Emma recognized it for what it was: an abuse of power designed to humiliate and control. She had seen this dynamic in interrogation rooms, in occupied territories, in places where people with temporary authority used it to strip away dignity from those who couldn't fight back. I'm not required to prove anything to you. Actually, you are, Ashley interjected, pulling out her phone as if to record what came next. Personnel security is a legitimate concern, and if you're representing yourself falsely, I'm not representing myself as anything other than what I am. Which is what exactly? Derek pressed. Because your story keeps changing. Emma's green eyes moved from face to face, cataloging the expressions of anticipated entertainment, the hunger for someone else's humiliation that seemed to drive certain personalities. She had seen these same expressions on the faces of insurgents who enjoyed the power they held over prisoners, the sadistic pleasure that came from forcing others to surrender their dignity. The realization struck her with sudden clarity. This wasn't about food service evaluation or personnel security. This was about people who enjoyed causing pain to those they perceived as vulnerable. Blake Harrison might or might not be General Harrison's son, but he was definitely someone who got satisfaction from tormenting others. And Emma Mitchell had spent too many years protecting innocent people from predators to let this continue in silence. You want to know what I am? She asked quietly. her voice carrying a new quality that made several nearby conversations pause. "I'm someone who's trying very hard to give you the opportunity to walk away from this conversation with your dignity intact." Blake laughed, but the sound was less confident than before. "Listen to her, threatening us now. Kitchen worker with delusions of grandeur thinks she can intimidate Special Forces candidates. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm offering advice." "What kind of advice could you possibly—" The conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the kitchen area. Sergeant Miller's voice carried across the mess hall with urgency that cut through every other conversation. "Mitchell, we've got a problem with the main gas line. I need you back here now." Emma immediately stepped away from the serving line, but Blake's voice followed her. "How convenient. Running away when the questions get too hard?" She paused, looking back at the group of 4 who had spent the better part of 30 minutes trying to tear down a woman who was simply trying to do her job. "I'm not running away. I'm responding to an emergency." "What kind of emergency could a kitchen worker possibly handle?" Tyler asked mockingly. Emma's response was quiet, but it carried across the mess hall with perfect clarity. The kind that keeps this building from exploding while 200 people are eating lunch. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving behind a suddenly quiet mess hall where the entertainment value of harassment had been replaced by the sobering reality of actual danger. Emma quickly accessed her specialized equipment storage, retrieving professional-grade emergency communication devices featuring military-standard smartphone technology with encrypted connectivity capabilities designed for extreme operational environments. The ruggedized tablet she utilized had been engineered specifically for high-stress scenarios, its reinforced construction capable of withstanding explosive impacts and maintaining data integrity during crisis situations that would completely destroy standard civilian electronics. In the kitchen, the situation was immediately clear to Emma's trained eyes. The main gas connection showed stress fractures that hadn't been there during her morning inspection. The metal fittings were loose, and the distinctive smell of natural gas was becoming stronger by the minute. More concerning was the pattern of damage. This wasn't normal wear or accidental damage. Someone had deliberately weakened the connection. "Sergeant, when was the last time anyone other than kitchen staff had access to this area?" Miller checked his logbook. "Building maintenance was here yesterday afternoon, and—" He paused, checking another entry. "The evaluation team requested a tour of the back areas about 20 minutes ago, said they needed to see our full operation." Emma's hands worked quickly to assess the damage, while her mind processed the implications. 20 minutes ago, she had been dealing with Blake Harrison's group at the serving line, but Blake himself had disappeared for several minutes, claiming to be evaluating other areas of the facility. "Sergeant, I need you to start evacuation procedures. Quiet, orderly, but immediate. Don't announce why, just say there's a routine drill." "Mitchell, that's not my call to make. I need to check with—" "Sergeant," Emma's voice carried an authority that Miller had never heard from her before. "Trust me on this. That gas leak is going to become an explosion within the next 15 minutes unless we get people out of here." Miller stared at her for a moment, recognizing something in her tone and bearing that went far beyond food service experience. "How do you know that?" "Because I know what deliberate sabotage looks like, and I know how natural gas behaves in confined spaces with multiple ignition sources." The words hung between them, revealing more about Emma's background than 18 months of careful deflection had hidden. Miller's eyes widened as he processed what she had just told him, but before he could respond, she was already moving toward the emergency shutoff controls. "Start the evacuation, Sergeant, please." Miller hesitated for only a moment before reaching for his radio. Whatever Emma Mitchell's story was, she had just demonstrated knowledge that could save everyone in the building. "All personnel, this is a routine emergency drill. Please proceed to your designated assembly areas in an orderly fashion." Meanwhile, in the mess hall, Blake Harrison was watching the early stages of evacuation with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When Derek approached him with questions about the timing, Blake's response was barely audible. Sometimes you have to create opportunities to see how people really respond under pressure. But Emma was already moving through a mental checklist that had nothing to do with kitchen work and everything to do with preventing mass casualties. She had exactly 12 minutes to either fix the sabotage or get everyone far enough away to survive what was coming. The question was whether Blake Harrison had underestimated what he was dealing with or whether this had been his plan all along. Did you catch those details about gas line safety? Comment below if you've ever had to step up when others doubted you. Share your story. Every hidden hero deserves recognition. Back in the kitchen, Emma's movements had taken on the focused precision of someone working against a deadly countdown. Her hands traced the damaged gas connections with practiced efficiency, while her mind calculated pressure buildup rates and explosion radiuses. Sergeant Miller watched in fascination as the quiet kitchen worker transformed into someone who clearly understood industrial systems at an expert level. "Mitchell, where did you learn about gas line maintenance?" "Long story, Sergeant. How's the evacuation going?" Miller checked his radio. "About 60% complete, but people are starting to ask questions. Some of the Special Forces candidates are refusing to leave, saying they want to help with whatever the real problem is." Emma's hands stilled on the shutoff valve. Of course Blake and his team weren't evacuating. They wanted to be here for whatever happened next, whether that was Emma's failure to handle the crisis or her success in ways that would reveal more than she wanted them to know. "How much time do we have?" Miller asked. Emma studied the stress patterns in the metal, the rate of gas accumulation, the proximity to multiple heat sources. 8 minutes, maybe 10 if we're lucky. Can you fix it? The honest answer was yes. Emma had dealt with far more complex explosive situations under much worse conditions, but fixing it would require techniques and knowledge that would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. The alternative was controlled evacuation to a safe distance and letting the explosion happen in an empty building. "I can try, but Sergeant, I need you to make sure everyone is at least 200 feet away from this building. Don't let anyone back inside until I give the all clear." "What about you?" "I'll be fine." Miller started to leave, then turned back. "Mitchell, I don't know what your story is, but when this is over, we're going to have a conversation." "Yes, Sergeant." Alone in the kitchen, Emma allowed herself a moment to consider her options. She could disable the sabotage using standard repair techniques that would work, but take 20 minutes she didn't have. She could use advanced techniques that would work in 5 minutes, but reveal specialized training. Or she could evacuate herself and let Blake Harrison's sabotage succeed in destroying the building, which would certainly reveal his true intentions, but would also destroy evidence and potentially hurt innocent people. The sound of voices in the mess hall decided it for her. Despite Miller's orders, someone was still in the building. Through the serving window, she could see Blake Harrison's massive frame near the front entrance, apparently arguing with someone about evacuation procedures. Emma's green eyes hardened as she realized what was happening. Blake wasn't just refusing to evacuate, he was preventing others from leaving, creating a situation where his sabotage would cause maximum casualties. This wasn't about testing her capabilities anymore. This was about eliminating witnesses to his real identity and mission. She had encountered this kind of operative before, someone who used military cover to infiltrate bases, gather intelligence, and eliminate security threats. Blake Harrison wasn't General Harrison's son. He was an enemy agent who had somehow infiltrated the base, and Emma's presence as an unknown factor had forced him to accelerate his timeline. The realization brought a cold clarity that 18 months of peaceful kitchen work hadn't quite erased. Emma Mitchell might have chosen to serve food instead of fighting wars, but she had never stopped being someone who protected innocent people from those who meant them harm. Her hands moved to the damaged gas connections with deadly precision, not to repair them slowly and safely, but to speed up the timeline in a controlled way. If Blake wanted an explosion, she would give him one, but on her terms, not his. She had exactly 6 minutes to turn Blake Harrison's sabotage into his own trap, and she was going to need every second of specialized training she had spent 18 months trying to forget. The transformation was subtle but complete. Emma's posture shifted, her movements became more economical, and her eyes took on the 1,000-yard stare of someone calculating trajectories and blast radiuses. For the first time in 18 months, she wasn't thinking like a kitchen worker, trying to avoid attention. She was thinking like the EOD specialist who had defused 847 explosive devices without losing a single member of her team. The question was whether Blake Harrison had any idea what he had just awakened. Through the serving window, Emma could see Blake positioning himself strategically near the main exit, his massive frame effectively blocking the fastest escape route while maintaining the appearance of helping with evacuation. 6 young recruits had been separated from the main group and were now trapped in the mess hall's far corner, apparently following Blake's directions to secure the area before leaving. Emma's trained eyes immediately recognized the tactical setup. Blake had created a kill zone with maximum casualties and minimum escape options. The gas leak she was dealing with wasn't just sabotage, it was the trigger for a carefully planned elimination operation. Her hands moved with deadly precision across the damaged connections, but instead of repairing them, she was accelerating the timeline in a very specific way. If Blake wanted an explosion, she would give him exactly what he had planned, but with one crucial difference. She would control the direction and force of the blast, 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The emergency medical supplies Emma deployed included advanced trauma management equipment, featuring professional-grade hemostatic agents and burn treatment compounds specifically formulated for explosive injuries. Her portable medical kit contained battlefield-tested pharmaceuticals and specialized emergency medications designed for severe trauma response, providing hospital-level treatment capabilities in extreme emergency situations where conventional medical facilities were unavailable. Emma's movements became more fluid as muscle memory, 18 months dormant, began to resurface. Her fingers traced the gas line's weak points with the precision of someone who had spent years understanding exactly how things exploded and how to control those explosions. The damaged connection Blake had created was crude but effective, clearly the work of someone with demolitions training, but not the subtle expertise of a true specialist. 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Share this right now before the explosion happens. Tag someone who needs to see what real heroism looks like. This moment will leave you speechless. "Hey!" Blake's voice boomed across the mess hall as he noticed Emma's silhouette moving purposefully in the kitchen. "Kitchen worker, what are you doing back there?" Emma didn't respond. She was calculating blast patterns, considering the structural integrity of the walls, and planning the exact sequence of movements that would get 6 trapped recruits to safety while exposing Blake Harrison for what he really was. 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Through the window, she could see Derek Walsh approaching the kitchen entrance, apparently on Blake's orders. Ashley Rodriguez was herding the 6 recruits further into the corner, effectively concentrating them in the area that would suffer maximum damage when the explosion occurred. Tyler Brooks had positioned himself near the emergency alarm system, ready to prevent any warnings that might disrupt the timeline. Emma's green eyes hardened as the full scope of Blake's operation became clear. This wasn't just sabotage. It was a coordinated attack designed to eliminate multiple targets while maintaining plausible deniability. The 6 recruits weren't random victims. They were specific targets whose elimination would serve Blake's larger mission. 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Derek pushed through the kitchen doors just as Emma finished her modifications to Blake's sabotage. Instead of a chaotic explosion that would destroy everything in the immediate area, she had created a controlled blast that would channel most of its force away from the mess hall and toward the exterior wall. "What are you doing?" Derek demanded, his nervous energy crackling as he approached her position. Emma straightened up, wiping her hands on her gray t-shirt. For the first time all day, her posture carried none of the defensive hesitation that had marked her interactions with Blake's group. Her shoulders were square, her stance balanced, and her green eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had made a decision. "I'm preventing a mass casualty event." Derek's expression shifted as he processed what she had just said. "What are you talking about? This is just a routine gas leak." "No, it's not." Emma's voice carried an authority that made Derek take an involuntary step backward. "It's a deliberate attempt to kill 6 specific targets and eliminate anyone who might identify Blake Harrison as an enemy operative." The words hung in the air between them like an explosive device waiting to detonate. Derek's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally fear as he realized Emma knew far more than she should. 3 minutes and 15 seconds. "You're crazy," Derek said, but his hand was already moving toward the radio on his belt. "Blake needs to hear this. You're having some kind of breakdown." Emma watched Derek's movements with the patient attention of a predator, evaluating prey. His positioning, his breathing, the way his eyes darted between her and the modified gas connections, everything about his behavior confirmed that he was part of Blake's operation. "Go ahead and call Blake," she said calmly. "Tell him his sabotage didn't work the way he planned." Derek's radio crackled to life before he could key the transmit button. Blake's voice emerged with barely controlled rage. "Derek, get out of there now! Something's wrong with the timeline." 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The urgency in Blake's transmission confirmed Emma's assessment. He had expected the explosion to occur by now, and the delay was forcing him to improvise. Through the serving window, she could see him abandoning his position near the exit and moving rapidly toward the kitchen, his massive frame no longer trying to maintain the pretense of helpful evacuation assistance. Emma looked at Derek with something that might have been pity. You have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to get those 6 recruits out of the building and away from the blast zone. If you choose to help Blake complete his mission instead, you'll share his fate. What blast zone? What are you talking about? Instead of answering, Emma moved toward the kitchen's rear exit, the one that led directly to the loading dock, and provided the fastest route to safety for anyone who knew the layout. Her movements were fluid and purposeful, no longer concealing the military bearing that 18 months of kitchen work had softened but never eliminated. Derek followed, his radio chattering with increasingly frantic transmissions from Blake. All units, converge on kitchen area. Primary target is not neutralized. Repeat, primary target is active. The transmission confirmed what Emma had suspected. She was Blake's primary target, and the 6 recruits were either secondary objectives or collateral damage designed to cover his real mission. But Blake had made a crucial error in his assessment. He had assumed Emma Mitchell was a kitchen worker, with some basic self-defense training and possibly a military background that made her worth eliminating as a potential witness. He had no idea he was dealing with someone who had spent 8 years defusing explosive devices in active combat zones, someone who understood demolitions better than he did, and someone who had turned his own sabotage into a trap designed specifically for him. 2 minutes and 5 seconds. The kitchen doors burst open as Blake entered with Tyler close behind. His army blue t-shirt was stretched tight across his heaving chest, and his bald head gleamed with sweat that had nothing to do with the building's temperature. For the first time since Emma had met him, Blake's carefully maintained composure showed cracks. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that confirmed Emma's assessment of his true nature. "I fixed your sabotage," Emma replied calmly, continuing her movement toward the rear exit, "though I suspect you will find my version more educational than what you originally planned." Blake's massive frame blocked her path to the exit, but Emma had expected that. Her green eyes cataloged his positioning, his balance, the way he held his hands, all the details that would matter in the next 60 seconds. 1 minute and 50 seconds. "Derek, get those civilians away from the blast area," Blake commanded, no longer bothering to maintain his cover. "Tyler, secure the alternate exits." Emma smiled for the first time all day, an expression that would have sent chills down the spine of anyone who understood what it meant. "You just confirmed everything I suspected about your operation. Thank you." "What operation? I don't know what you're talking about." "The operation where you infiltrate a military base, eliminate specific targets who might identify you, and disappear in the chaos of an accidental explosion. Except now, the explosion is going to happen exactly where you're standing, and it's going to leave evidence that will expose your entire network." Blake's expression shifted from confusion to cold calculation. Whatever game he had been playing was over, and Emma represented a threat that required immediate elimination. 1 minute and 20 seconds. Blake's hand moved toward the concealed weapon at his back, but Emma was already in motion. Her movement was economical and precise, the kind of combat technique that came from years of training and real-world application. She didn't fight Blake's superior size and strength. She used them against him, redirecting his momentum and sending his massive frame crashing into the steel prep table where she had been working moments before. The impact sent Blake's concealed pistol skittering across the floor, but, more importantly, it positioned him exactly where Emma needed him when the explosion occurred. 55 seconds. Tyler Brooks had produced his own weapon, but Derek was hesitating, apparently still processing the revelation that his mission parameters had changed. Emma used Derek's confusion to her advantage, putting him between herself and Tyler while moving steadily toward the position she needed to reach. "This is insane," Derek said, his voice rising with panic. "Blake, what is she talking about? What operation?" Blake was pulling himself upright, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead where he had struck the table edge. His carefully maintained cover was completely gone now, replaced by the cold professionalism of someone accustomed to killing. "She's a security risk who knows too much. Eliminate her and complete the mission." 40 seconds. Emma's hands moved to her gray t-shirt, gripping the fabric at her left shoulder. The movement drew confused looks from all 3 men until she tore the long sleeve completely away, exposing her left forearm to their view for the first time. The tattoo that emerged was immediately recognizable to anyone with military experience. The EOD badge was rendered in stark black ink, surrounded by detailed images of the tools used to disarm explosive devices. Below it, a series of numbers that represented successful disposal operations. 847 of them, 30 seconds. The room went silent except for the hissing of gas and the distant sound of evacuation procedures still underway outside. Blake's eyes fixed on the tattoo with the recognition of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. "Explosive ordnance disposal," Tyler whispered, his weapon wavering as the implications hit him. "Primary EOD specialist, Delta Force attached," Emma said calmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just revealed her true credentials. 847 successful disposals in active combat zones, which means I know exactly what your sabotage was supposed to accomplish, and I know exactly how to make it accomplish something completely different. 20 seconds. Blake's face had gone pale beneath his tan as he processed what Emma had just told him. An EOD specialist with Delta Force experience meant someone with access to classified information, someone whose elimination would be a high-priority objective for enemy operations, and someone who possessed the exact skills needed to turn his sabotage into a weapon against him. "You're supposed to be dead," Blake said, his voice carrying a recognition that chilled Emma's blood. "The Kandahar operation. Everyone in your unit was eliminated." 15 seconds. Emma's green eyes held Blake's gaze with the steady attention of someone who had faced death many times and survived when others hadn't. "Not everyone. And now you know why someone wanted you to believe we were all eliminated." The truth hit Blake like a physical blow. Emma Mitchell wasn't a random kitchen worker who had stumbled onto his operation. She was a specific target whose survival had compromised his entire mission, and her presence at Fort Bragg wasn't coincidence. It was a trap that had been 18 months in the making. 10 seconds. Emma's hand found the emergency alarm system that Tyler had been guarding. Her thumb hovered over the button that would trigger base-wide evacuation procedures and bring security forces running. But she didn't press it. Instead, she looked directly at Blake Harrison and smiled. "You wanted to see what was under my sleeves. Now you know. And in 5 seconds, you're going to understand why someone who defuses bombs for a living might be very good at making them explode exactly when and where she wants them to." 5 seconds. Blake's eyes widened as he realized that Emma had been controlling the timeline from the moment she entered the kitchen. The explosion wasn't an accident waiting to happen. It was a precisely calculated event designed to eliminate him and his team while preserving evidence of their operation. 3 seconds. Emma threw herself toward the rear exit as Blake lunged for his fallen weapon. Tyler raised his pistol toward her retreating form, while Derek stood frozen in the center of the kitchen, finally understanding that he was about to die in an explosion caused by his own team's sabotage. 1 second. The blast that followed was everything Blake had planned and nothing he had expected. The modified gas line explosion tore through the kitchen with devastating force, but instead of destroying evidence and eliminating witnesses, it channeled most of its energy toward the exterior wall where Blake and Tyler had positioned themselves. The concussion wave threw Derek toward the mess hall, injured but alive, while the main force of the explosion created a perfectly clear blast pattern that would tell investigators exactly what had happened and who had caused it. Emma had calculated the timing perfectly, throwing herself through the rear exit just as the explosion reached its peak intensity. The blast wave caught her as she cleared the doorway, sending her tumbling across the loading dock in a controlled fall that she had practiced hundreds of times in training scenarios. Her gray t-shirt was torn and burned, her long sleeves completely destroyed, but she was alive and conscious as emergency vehicles began arriving in response to the explosion. More importantly, the 6 recruits Blake had trapped in the mess hall were unharmed, protected by the blast direction Emma had engineered when she modified his sabotage. The first responders who reached the scene found Emma sitting on the loading dock, her exposed forearms revealing not only the EOD tattoo, but also the surgical scars, shrapnel marks, and burn patterns that told the story of 8 years spent defusing explosive devices in the world's most dangerous places. Her green eyes were clear and focused as she provided precise details about the explosion's cause and the location of evidence that would prove Blake Harrison's true identity and mission. Colonel Daniel Reynolds arrived on scene within 10 minutes of the explosion, his staff car screeching to a halt as he took in the devastation of his base's mess hall. A career military officer with 30 years of experience, Reynolds had seen enough combat zones to recognize professional demolition work when he encountered it. "Who was responsible for the explosion?" he demanded of the first responders. "The kitchen worker, sir. She's the one who—" "Where is she?" Emma rose from her position on the loading dock as Colonel Reynolds approached, her burned and tattered clothing unable to conceal the military bearing that 18 months of kitchen work had never truly hidden. Reynolds stopped short when he saw that the EOD tattoo on her exposed forearm, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing both the insignia and the scars that surrounded it. Without hesitation, Colonel Reynolds came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute. The gesture sent a ripple of shock through the assembled emergency responders, NCOs, and enlisted personnel who had gathered to deal with the explosion's aftermath. "Ma'am," Reynolds said, his voice carrying the respect due to someone whose service record spoke for itself. "Colonel Daniel Reynolds, commanding officer of Fort Bragg, I believe we need to discuss what happened here today." Emma returned the salute with the precision of someone whose military training had never been forgotten, only temporarily set aside. "Yes, sir, though I think you will find the evidence speaks for itself." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Blake Harrison's operation. The man claiming to be General Harrison's son was actually Dmitry Volkov, a Russian intelligence operative who had spent 3 years building his cover identity while infiltrating various military installations. His mission at Fort Bragg had been to eliminate surviving members of a classified Delta Force EOD unit, whose work in Afghanistan had disrupted several enemy operations. Derek Walsh was arrested as an accomplice, though his cooperation with investigators suggested he had been manipulated rather than fully recruited. Ashley Rodriguez and the real Tyler Brooks were cleared of involvement, having been used as unwitting cover for the operation. The 6 recruits Blake had targeted for elimination were revealed to be children of other Delta Force veterans, their presence at Fort Bragg creating an opportunity for revenge against families whose parents had cost enemy operations significant resources and personnel. But the most significant revelation came when investigators analyzed the precision of Emma's sabotage modifications. Her ability to redirect an explosion with surgical accuracy while under extreme time pressure had saved not only the 6 targeted recruits, but potentially dozens of other personnel who would have been caught in Blake's intended blast radius. Following the investigation, advanced insurance systems designed for high-value military contractors provided comprehensive liability coverage and specialized legal protection services. The institutional framework supporting veteran employment rights ensured proper recognition and compensation, while professional development programs offered specialized training opportunities for transitioning service members seeking civilian career advancement in technical fields. Word of Emma's actions spread through Fort Bragg with the speed that only military installations could achieve. Within hours, her story had reached every unit on base, carried by personnel who had been in the mess hall when the explosion occurred and witnessed her emergence from the kitchen with her true identity literally exposed. The 6 recruits she had saved were among the first to seek her out once she was released from the medical evaluation required after exposure to the blast. David Kim, the young specialist who had recognized her pressure point technique earlier in the day, approached her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for everything, but also, why were you working in the kitchen? Someone with your background could have any assignment you wanted." Emma considered the question while looking out at the base where she had found unexpected peace over the past 18 months. Her green eyes held the weight of experiences that couldn't be shared in casual conversation, but also a serenity that suggested she had found something valuable in her humble service. "Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with explosives and firearms, Specialist Kim. Sometimes they're fought with patience, compassion, and the willingness to serve others without needing recognition for it. But you could be training EOD specialists, leading missions, making a real difference. I am making a real difference. Every meal I serve feeds someone who's protecting our country. Every day I work without seeking attention or praise. I'm demonstrating that service isn't about glory. It's about doing what needs to be done, regardless of whether anyone notices." David's eyes brightened with understanding. "You're teaching us even when you're not trying to teach us. The best lessons usually work that way." Next week's story features a Navy SEAL disguised as a janitor who saves an entire submarine base. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss these incredible tales of hidden heroes. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Miller, whose weathered face showed the complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and professional embarrassment that comes with discovering you've been working alongside a legend without knowing it. "Mitchell," he said, then caught himself. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize for not recognizing what you were. 18 months you've been under my supervision, and I never saw past the kitchen whites." "That was the point, Sergeant. I needed time to heal from things that couldn't be fixed with medical treatment. The kitchen gave me purpose without pressure, contribution without combat. It was exactly what I needed. And now, Emma looked around at the base that had become her sanctuary, considering how the day's events had changed her carefully constructed quiet life. Now, I suppose I have some decisions to make. Colonel Reynolds approached before she could elaborate, carrying a folder that suggested official business rather than casual conversation. Ms. Mitchell, I have some paperwork that requires your attention, and some offers that you might find interesting. Emma accepted the folder, but didn't open it immediately. Sir, before we discuss my future, I need to know how extensive Blake's operation was. Were there other infiltrators? Other targets? The investigation is ongoing, but preliminary intelligence suggests his network was larger than initially apparent. Your actions didn't just save lives today. They exposed an operation that could have compromised multiple installations. Which means there will be other operatives trying to complete what Blake started. Reynolds nodded grimly. The threat assessment is classified, but yes. Your survival and the exposure of this operation will likely trigger additional attempts to eliminate you and others from your original unit. Emma's hands unconsciously traced the exposed scars on her forearms, reminders of 8 years spent facing down death in service to her country. The peaceful interlude of kitchen work had been healing, but she had always known it was temporary. People like her didn't get to retire from the war. They only got brief respites between battles. What are my options, Colonel? You could accept protection and relocation under a new identity. You could return to active duty with appropriate rank and recognition for your previous service. Or, Reynolds paused, studying her face carefully. You could continue what you've been doing here, but with official support and resources that would allow you to identify and neutralize threats while maintaining your cover. The third option intrigued Emma more than she wanted to admit. 18 months of kitchen work had taught her that sometimes the most effective operations were the ones that looked completely ordinary from the outside. An EOD specialist hiding in plain sight could gather intelligence, identify threats, and protect installations in ways that obvious security measures couldn't achieve. The kitchen option comes with some significant advantages, Reynolds continued. Personnel rotate through dining facilities constantly, giving you access to information and individuals that traditional intelligence gathering might miss. And your demonstrated ability to remain undetected suggests you could operate with minimal oversight. Emma opened the folder Reynolds had given her, scanning documents that detailed everything from her original classified service record to the current threat assessment that made her a high-priority target. The bureaucratic language couldn't capture the reality of what she had lived through, but it painted a clear picture of why she couldn't simply return to civilian anonymity. There's one more thing you should know, Reynolds said quietly. The investigation into Blake's operation revealed communications suggesting that your original Delta Force unit wasn't eliminated in Kandahar. Some of your teammates may still be alive, operating under deep cover. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. For 18 months, she had carried the guilt of being the sole survivor of an operation that had cost the lives of 8 teammates she had considered family. The possibility that some of them might still be alive changed everything about her situation and her choices. How many? Unknown. The intelligence is fragmentary and hasn't been confirmed, but Emma, Reynolds' use of her first name carried weight that his formal tone hadn't. If they are alive, and if they're still operational, you might be the only person who can identify and extract them safely. Emma closed the folder and looked out at Fort Bragg, where personnel were already beginning the cleanup and investigation that would follow the day's events. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of helicopters bringing in additional security teams, the rhythm of military efficiency responding to a crisis. She had spent 18 months learning to find peace in simple service, discovering that heroism didn't require recognition, and that strength could be expressed through patience rather than force. But she had also learned that some responsibilities couldn't be set aside, some debts couldn't be repaid through kitchen work, and some battles required the specific skills that had made her the best EOD specialist of her generation. Colonel, I'll need some time to consider my options. How much time? Before Emma could answer, her phone rang with an unknown number that displayed a peculiar pattern she hadn't seen in 18 months. The sequence of digits was a coded identifier used by intelligence operatives to signal urgent contact from surviving team members. Emma stared at the phone for several seconds before answering, her voice carefully neutral. Hello? The voice on the other end was one she had thought she would never hear again, distorted by encryption but unmistakably familiar. Eagle 7, this is Falcon Base. Emma's breath caught as she recognized the call sign of Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, her former teammate and one of the 8 people she had believed died in the Kandahar operation. Falcon Base, this is Eagle 7. Verify authentication. Kandahar Sunrise, Checkpoint Bravo, coffee was terrible. The mundane details that had become their private code confirmed what Emma barely dared to believe. Sarah Rodriguez was alive, had been alive for 18 months, and was making contact now for reasons that couldn't be coincidental with the day's events. Sarah, where are you? What happened in Kandahar? The reports said... Reports were classified fiction, designed to protect operational security. Emma, listen carefully. We found Rodriguez. He's alive. Emma's mind raced through the implications. Rodriguez was their former team leader, Captain Miguel Rodriguez, Sarah's older brother, and the man who had trained Emma in advanced EOD techniques. If he was alive, if any of her team was alive, then everything she had believed about Kandahar was wrong. That's impossible. I saw the explosion. I searched the rubble. There were no survivors except me. Ma'am, the explosion you witnessed was staged. Miguel and 4 others were extracted during the chaos, but their survival had to remain classified because they were reassigned to a deep cover operation targeting the same network that sent Blake Harrison after you today. The revelation struck Emma like lightning, illuminating 18 months of guilt and grief in a completely different context. Her teammates hadn't died in Kandahar. They had been reassigned to a mission so classified that even she hadn't been told the truth. Sarah, why are you telling me this now? Because the network knows you're alive, and they know you compromised Blake's operation. Miguel's cover is blown, and his team is trapped behind enemy lines. They need extraction, and you're the only person with the skills and clearance level to get them out. Emma looked at Colonel Reynolds, who had been listening to her end of the conversation with growing understanding. The choices she had thought she was considering, protection, active duty, or continued cover operation, had just been replaced by a single imperative that trumped all other considerations. Her teammates were alive, they were in danger, and she was the only person who could save them. How long do I have? 72 hours before their position is completely compromised. After that, even if we could extract them, the intelligence they have gathered would be lost. Emma closed her eyes and let 18 months of carefully maintained peace slip away like water through her fingers. She had learned valuable lessons about service and humility during her time in the kitchen, but some missions could only be completed by people with very specific skills. Sarah, send me everything you have on their location and the extraction parameters. I'll need full operational support and a team that can work with minimal oversight. Already arranged. Transport leaves from Fort Bragg in 6 hours. Emma ended the call and looked at Colonel Reynolds, who nodded with the understanding of someone who had seen many soldiers face the choice between safety and duty. I suppose that answers the question about your future assignment, he said. Yes, sir. Though I have one request. Name it. Emma gestured toward the damaged mess hall, where she had spent 18 months learning that strength could be expressed through service rather than combat. When I get back, I'd like to continue working in the kitchen, not as cover for an operation, but because that work has value that doesn't depend on recognition or excitement. Reynolds smiled with genuine respect. I think that can be arranged. The kitchen staff could probably use someone with your particular expertise in food safety. As Emma walked toward her quarters to prepare for a mission she had never expected to receive, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her from elite special operations to kitchen work and back to the battlefield in a single day. The scars on her exposed forearms caught the late afternoon sunlight, reminders of 847 explosive devices that hadn't claimed her life. Soon, she would be facing the 848th, and this time the stakes would be higher than they had ever been. Not just her own survival, but the lives of teammates she had mourned for 18 months and the intelligence that could prevent future operations like Blake Harrison's. But first, she had one more service to complete at Fort Bragg. In the temporary kitchen that had been set up to replace the damaged mess hall, Emma Mitchell prepared one final meal for the soldiers who had become her community during 18 months of quiet service. As she worked, personnel began gathering to thank her for saving their lives, to ask about her background, to understand how someone they had seen every day could have hidden such extraordinary capabilities. Emma answered their questions with the same quiet competence she had shown while serving food, explaining that heroism wasn't about dramatic moments, but about doing whatever needed to be done when it needed to be done. David Kim approached as she was finishing the evening meal preparation. "Ma'am, will you be back?" Eventually, Specialist Kim, service takes many forms, but it never really ends. What should we tell people about what happened today? Emma considered the question while looking around at the faces of young soldiers who would carry forward whatever lessons they had learned from watching someone they had dismissed prove to be more than anyone had imagined. Tell them that real strength doesn't announce itself, that heroism usually wears work clothes, and that the most dangerous person in any room is probably the one nobody notices. As the sun set over Fort Bragg, Emma Mitchell walked toward the transport that would carry her back into the shadow world of classified operations and deadly missions. But she carried with her the lessons of 18 months spent proving that service didn't require recognition, that strength could be expressed through patience, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with explosives and firearms, but with simple human decency. The EOD tattoo on her exposed forearm caught the last rays of sunlight as she boarded the aircraft. 847 successful operations leading toward number 848. Behind her, the soldiers of Fort Bragg would remember the day they learned that heroes often hide in plain sight, serving quietly until the moment when their specialized skills become the difference between life and death. And in a kitchen somewhere, meals would be served by people whose stories would never be told, whose sacrifices would never be recognized, and whose strength would never be announced. Because real service doesn't seek applause, it simply does what needs to be done, one meal at a time, one day at a time, one life at a time. The aircraft disappeared into the gathering darkness, carrying Emma Mitchell toward a reunion 18 months in the making, and a mission that would determine whether her teammates' survival had been worth the price of letting the world believe they were dead. But that's a story for another day.
These stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the